So what this slide is, and we can give it to you, my email is bruce@ahcgroup.com. And you probably also want to send it to Marty, M-A-R-T-I, at ahcgroup.com. And we will send you this package of slides. But what happened in about the 70s, at the beginning of a lot of movements, social justice movements, environmental movements, energy awareness, big oil debates, there was a series of regulations that allowed end-of-pipe regulations, such as waste containment and recovery programs. And then about 1990, there was a development of environmental management systems based on ISO standards. And then about 2000, people like Stu Hart wrote Capitalism at a Crossroads, where people were beginning, and business schools were starting to have net impact societies, or whatever business school I went to was started to have about 4 to 8% of their student body interested in these sorts of things that I'm talking to you about. And that 4 to 8% were people that understood that there was something behind this idea of corporate social responsibility. I would like to tell you today that by 2012, we're way beyond those bubbles. We are already into a model where Wall Street rewards stakeholder value creation, not shareholder value creation. So for those of you who are in investment relations, or those of you who work in the space of stock valuation, I'd recommend that you think of changing your model from a model that just looks at risk management, compliance, and asset recovery, and begins to look at these other vaguer things that are actually determining the intangible value of your firm, right? And these are things such as icon products. It was very important that Toyota took on the hybrid powertrain because they anticipated that we could smash GM and Chrysler to the degree in which Obama had to save them. That was a calculated move. We wanted to create icon products where we proved that the automobile had a near future at a time when oil was becoming perceivable as $5 per gallon. Okay? So all the automakers had that evidence, and all the oil companies had that evidence. Toyota decided it wanted to make an icon product. Masco is making a lot of products which we make a larger profit margin on, called integrity brands. And I would argue that the whole Delta product family that we work on are all about integrity brands. I believe, if you check out my last 3 books, that there is a phenomenon in the world called social response capitalism, where the best firms are responding not only to price, quality, distribution, and technology, but also to social needs, right? So that's why you're having trouble on your tobacco stock, and that's why you're even having trouble getting your return on your Intel stock, right? Because portables are a social need now, and Intel chips are less of a social need. So if you think of it in the way I'm trying to describe it to you, it's a stakeholder value creation process. It's no longer a stockholder value creation process. Did anybody want to ask me about that before I move on? If you really want to get into that, I'd suggest you read my book called World Inc. And worldincbook.com has comments from all the valuation firms about this concept, so you could track it that way. Now we got 10 minutes to close because I want to keep it the last 15 minutes very interactive, if I could. So the one thing you learn when you become free and wealthy, and at this point I want to say that before I got to Cornell, I want all of you to know that when my father died when I was 3, my mother had $27 in the bank. So when I talk about wealth, I'm not talking about a Mitt Romney type of wealth, right? I'm talking about having earned every penny in my firm, right? And so you have to ask yourself, how did that happen in a way in which you reduce debt early, right? Because the logical thing we're trained in business school to do is use other people's money. Is that not the fundamental of business training? So Ben Franklin's essay, The Way to Wealth, can help you get your head on straight in a way that is much, much larger than this sustainability debate. I believe that things like hydrofracking and oil sands development are inevitable that the best I can do is improve the performance of those giants that are on that path, all right? But I also believe that we all can control our life. And so these next 10 minutes are about ways to control your own destiny, whatever the world is doing, all right? And that I've learned mostly from Ben Franklin. So Ben Franklin, has anybody read his little essay called The Way to Wealth? I suggest you read it while still in your MBA program. It is the most read essay around the world. And so when I'm in Istanbul, people know it. When I'm in China, my newest book, Doing More with Less, is coming out in Mandarin. And often I will sell 10 times better in Brazil and China and Istanbul than in the United States. Because you need to accept the reality that the United States is still in a bubble regarding these historic challenges that I'm talking to you about. We still have about a decade bubble of comfort, a margin of comfort, a kind of moat, right, that Turkey doesn't have, that Brazil doesn't have, that the Asian countries that you're talking about doesn't have. So in FMC, our work is more productive in Asia. We just built a new headquarters in China because they see the world going towards biochemistry, towards renewable chemicals, right, towards lithium. While in the United States, there's still an ideology of the normal, okay? They call it normal. I call it tiptoeing towards the edge of a cliff. So Ben Franklin is much more progressive and lasting. He's lasted 300 years. And in reading his book, first of all, after you read The Way to Wealth, it's an MBA type book. I suggest you read his autobiography because that's where he's incredibly funny. And that's about how he determined his own life. But The Way to Wealth says something that I hope you check out in my book called Doing More with Less. And if you go to the Doing More with Less webpage, you'll see about 5 TV shows on it. The BBC Noon Show, which is the largest TV show in the world. You'll see wallstreet.com on it, yahoo.com. Some of the finance people are beginning to get this. But essentially, what I'm talking about in the videos and the podcasts of that webpage, for free around the world, is this notion that we all have to become like Ben Franklin all over again. It doesn't matter if you're a lawyer or an accountant or a senator or an MBA or a judge. In today's incredibly volatile global marketplace, you need to become like Ben Franklin. And that's frugal with your time and frugal with your resources. Ben Franklin never wasted a minute. Ben Franklin knew from the start that he was going to carve out his own destiny. He was very seldom wasteful of his friends. Ben Franklin, I've gone to many of the clubs that he went to around the world. He had 54 dinner memberships in London, and I've been to about a dozen of them. I have a hobby of checking out Ben Franklin stuff. So 300 years ago, he knew that he had to dine with his potential enemy, so that his son, a governor, got imprisoned when the British invaded, while Ben Franklin was befriended, all right? So Ben Franklin knew that the world was moving towards being diplomatic instead of warlike, being frugal, and being inventive. And so I've written, my 8th book is a celebration of Ben Franklin to try and explode and expand this definition of sustainability. I'll get to you in a second. Because the business of business is social capital, not financial capital. That what my wealth gives me is the ability to do whatever the hell I want, wherever I want, whenever I want, right? And I make sure that the 15 biggest breadwinners in our firm have that same freedom, right? So that in order to have a fate that is as much based on freedom, you need to learn, I believe, how to operate within the corporate mansion, because of the 500 largest economies in the world, the great majority of them are corporations now, not nation states. And so in order to survive within the corporation, I think it pays to think like Ben Franklin, one of our first truly global citizens. So last time I was in Istanbul going to talk to a man who runs the Goldman Sachs of Istanbul. You can look up his name, Errol User, U-S-E-R. He runs User Corporation. He's interested in 3 of my corporate affiliates. When I talk to the people, I was on the White House of Clinton and Gore. So when I talk to the Democrats, they say he's a great guy. He just gave $100,000 to pray with Obama about 3 weeks ago. Errol User, you can check out his name. When I talk to the Democrats, they say he's a weapons dealer. I don't know which he is, but I do go and talk with him. And when I asked him about Ben Franklin, because I respect his opinion, he said, Ben Franklin, he's our man. If he can't do it, no one can in Turkey. So here's the guy who's privatizing Turkey's airports, Turkey's bus stations, Turkey's soccer teams. Errol User, check him out. He thinks like Ben Franklin. So I have to ask myself, if these supreme capitalists around the world are thinking like Ben Franklin, why can't we? That's my summary. I came in 2 minutes early. Sir.
Could you expound on the concept of frugality with time?
Yes. So the most important thing to say is that because I lost my father when I was 3, I was certain by the age of 10, no one in the world would care for me. My mother had $27 in the bank. She made good by caring for foster kids. So I had Chinese sisters, Su Ying Cheng, Puerto Rican brothers. I remember the prejudice of going to the supermarket for my mom, where people would say on suburban Long Island, how many men is she sleeping with? Okay? So during that time, I learned not to waste my time because I knew no one was going to build my corporation except myself. So part of the trick of frugality is knowing it's a lifelong habit, right? So even when I was a professor building this S corporation, investing in TIA CREF to the max to do tax-deferred annuity, I was saving 35% of my income because I feared someone would take it away, all right? So whatever you paid me, now it's millions per year, I still save 35% of that, all right? That's Ben Franklin thinking. Ben Franklin was free to do whatever the hell he wanted by the time he was 42. Check out his autobiography. Most of the interesting lives of the 21st century will be like that. So frugal with your time, because time goes by. By the time I was 20, I had created a firm, which I sold by the time I was 21. By the time I was 30, like classical enterprisers, I began thinking about the environment. But I didn't think about the environment until I was 30. I didn't think about human talent until I was 30. I started thinking about profit and self-determination in those early years. So in the beginning, you have to be so frugal with your time that you don't waste a friend, because you never know when that friend's going to come through for you. So for example, in the early days of my S corporation, I met a man who I took law classes with, who actually, his family owned Rembrandts. That was very convenient, that he viewed me as a friend, because he would just lend me 10 million here or 5 million there, and I would find a way to pay him back. See what I mean? So being frugal with your time is also being frugal with your friends, and it's also being frugal with who you hire, right? So I need to let you know that when I hire MBAs, some of the times they go off on a mission for me, often with one of these senior associates, they'll submit a $100 taxi bill to me. And I'll go, why did it cost you $100? I've been in DuPont Circle many times and I know where your hotel is. And I actually intervene on this and I go, I mean, if it was 20 bucks, I'd live with it. I go, why 100? He said, I had a headache. So I took a limo. That's not frugal with my resources. You understand? And so when I have someone like a Gerald Bresnik who has 4 homes and great wealth, being frugal with my money, I'm loyal to him. So frugality allows you the 5 fundamental things: the avoidance of enemies, the saving of your time, loyalty, which are all the key things of being a capitalist. Does that help? the biggest problem in America is we think frugality is the same as cheapness, right? And what I would like you to know that most of the senior executives I work for understand that by being frugal, they're free. They're not at the mercy of what the board says. And that still gives us the right to lavish wealth onto those we love, right? And so being frugal doesn't mean you can't be generous. So these are the things I work out in my book, Doing More with Less, that I hope you check out. There's a chapter called Freedom and Fate. Thank you for your time. We'll see you again.